There is one God that almost every civilization on earth worshipped. They never met. They never traded a single word. And yet they all bowed to the same burning face in the sky. It dies every single evening. It is swallowed by darkness, dragged down beneath the edge of the world, and lost to the living. And every single morning, against all reason, it climbs back into the sky, reborn, blazing, impossibly alive again. The Egyptians were so terrified it might not return that they imagined it fighting a monster in the dark every night of the world. The Aztecs were so terrified it might not return that they fed it human blood, believing the sun would stop moving without it. And strangest of all, the Greeks, who gave us more gods than almost anyone, quietly demoted theirs into a minor figure. The same disk, worshipped as a king, feared as a judge who sees everything, mourned as a god who dies. It is, of course, the sun, the oldest deity that humanity ever knelt before, older than any name we still remember. From the Nile to the Andes, from the islands of Japan to the frozen north, cultures who never touched one another told the same story. A story of a god who is born at dawn, rules the sky at noon, and dies at dusk, every day, forever, without rest. Some gave that god a golden boat. Some gave him a chariot of fire. Some gave her a mirror, and some a crown of blood. But underneath every version, in every language, lies a single universal fear and a single universal hope. And here is the one idea that connects all of them, across every ocean and every age of the world. The sun's daily journey was humanity's very first myth of death, and its very first dream of resurrection. So, let us follow the sun. All the way around the world, through every great mythology, and all the way back to dawn. Begin with the simplest fact of human life. Every morning there is light. Every night there is its absence. To the ancient mind, this was not physics. It was a drama, a great living being that rose, triumphed, and then fell into the dark. And because the sun gave warmth and grain and the very possibility of life, it was not just powerful, it was good, and it was worshipped. So the sun became the first king of the gods. And nowhere on earth was that clearer than along the banks of the Nile. Follow the river south. Here the sun was not merely a god among others. He was the god, the source from whom all things poured out. His name was Ra, a falcon-headed figure crowned with a blazing solar disk wrapped around by a sacred rearing serpent. The Egyptians believed the pharaoh himself was the living son of Ra. To sit on Egypt's throne was to rule on behalf of the sun. But every evening they watched their great god sink beneath the western sand and simply vanish. And they asked the obvious question, where does he go? Their answer became one of the most breathtaking myths ever told. Ra does not simply set and disappear. Ra sails. By day he crosses the sky in a golden boat called the Manjet, the vessel of the daylight, sailing an invisible river overhead. At dawn he is a newborn child. At noon he is a powerful king in his prime, and by dusk he is a weary old man. When he reaches the west, he boards a second boat, the Mesektet, and descends into the underworld, into the shadow realm they called the Duat. And in that darkness, something is waiting for him, coiled and patient in the black subterranean river beneath the world. Apep, a monstrous serpent of pure chaos, vast beyond measure, whose single hunger is to swallow the sun and end the light forever. So, every night, a battle is fought. The gods aboard the barque strike down at the serpent with glowing spears in the underworld gloom. This is not the myth of a peaceful sunset. It is a war fought in total darkness every night for the survival of the world itself. And when Ra breaks over the eastern horizon at dawn, that sunrise is not a schedule. It is a victory, hard-won all over again. He is reborn as Khepri, the scarab, the young rising sun. Death and then resurrection every 12 hours without fail. That is the deep pattern beneath it all. The Egyptians looked at every single dawn and saw a god who had just defeated death in the night. And once, for a brief and radical moment, a single pharaoh tried to erase every other god and leave only the sun. His name was Akhenaten, and he declared that there was only one true divinity in all the world, the Aten. Not a falcon-headed man, not a myth with a human face, simply the sun disk itself, alone and supreme in the sky. In the art of his strange new city, the Aten's rays reached down like long straight arms, each one ending in a tiny open hand. Hands that touched the royal family directly, offering the gift of life. The sun, reaching down to hold you personally. It was perhaps the first attempt at monotheism anywhere in recorded history, and it did not outlive the man who dreamed it. When Akhenaten died, the old gods came flooding back, his temples were reopened, and his sun-only faith was buried in the sand. But the idea he had gambled everything on never fully died. The sun as the one supreme, all-seeing power above all others. Now travel east to the river valleys of Mesopotamia, an even older world, where that all-seeing quality took a very different shape. Here the sun god was called Shamash, to the older Sumerians before them, Utu. And he was the god of something surprising. Not war, not the harvest, justice. For the Mesopotamians reasoned quite simply that the sun sees absolutely everything. Nothing can hide from the light. It shines into every corner, exposes every crime, catches every lie whispered in the dark. So Shamash became the divine judge. Each dawn he rose between the eastern mountains to inspect the deeds of gods and of humankind. On the great law stone of King Hammurabi, it is Shamash carved at the very top, handing down the authority to rule and to judge. The message was unmistakable. These laws are not the whim of a mortal king. They come from the sun, the god who sees all. Here we meet a second great solar theme. The sun is not only a king, he is an eye, a witness, a tireless judge of the world below. Now cross to the Mediterranean, to the sunlit world of Greece, where the whole story takes a strange and unexpected turn. The Greeks personified the sun as Helios. Every morning he rose out of the eastern ocean in a chariot wreathed in fire. 4 immortal horses, breathing flame, dragging the burning disk across the great dome of heaven from the east to the far west. At evening he sank into the western sea and sailed back around the sleeping world in a golden cup to begin the climb again. Here is the all-seeing theme once more. Helios sees all things and hears all things, they said, from his great height in the sky. It was Helios who spotted the secret affairs of the gods, and Helios who told a grieving mother exactly where her lost daughter had been taken. And yet, here is the turn that sets Greece apart. In Greece, the sun was never the supreme god, not even close to it. Helios was a titan, older than the ruling gods, but overshadowed by them. The true king of heaven was Zeus, god of storm and sky. And over the centuries, something even stranger happened. Helios slowly began to fade behind a younger, brighter Olympian god. Most people today will confidently tell you the Greek god of the sun was Apollo, And here is what most people never realize. Originally, he was not. Apollo was the god of light, of music, of prophecy and healing. He was never, at first, the physical sun. The true, original sun god was always Helios. Two entirely separate divinities carrying two entirely separate ideas. But over time the Greeks blurred them together until Apollo quietly absorbed the sun and old Helios slipped away into the shadows. By the end of it, the true personification of the sun had been demoted, and the god of poetry and prophecy was left wearing his crown. It is a remarkable exception in the whole history of religion, a culture that looked at the sun and decided it was not, in the end, the highest god. The Romans inherited Helios and renamed him Sol, and for centuries he too remained a modest secondary deity in their crowded pantheon, until a single emperor changed everything. In the crumbling, war-torn 3rd century, Rome was fracturing, desperate for something to unite it. And the Emperor Aurelian reached for the one god that every soldier and every citizen across the empire could see with their own eyes: the sun. He elevated him into Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, a god who always wins, who cannot be beaten, who never stays dead. In the year 274, Aurelian dedicated a grand new temple to him and fixed his great festival at the turning of the winter solstice, the birthday of the unconquered sun, the day when the light, at its very weakest, is born again and finally begins to climb. That date, the 25th of December, would echo down the centuries afterward in ways that Aurelian could never have foreseen. And once again, the same deep pattern. The sun at its darkest and weakest, dying, then reborn, invincible and unconquered. Now go north, into the bitter cold, where the sun is not a proud warrior at all, but a frightened woman fleeing for her life. In Norse myth, the sun was a goddess. Her name was Sol, or Suna, and her story is one of relentless, breathless terror. She rides across the sky in a chariot drawn by 2 swift horses, carrying the burning disk of the day behind her. But she does not travel across the heavens for pleasure. She travels because she is being hunted, chased without pause. Behind her races a monstrous wolf named Skull, jaws stretched wide, slowly closing the distance across the whole vault of the sky. That is why she never slows down. That, the Norse believed, is why the sun crosses the sky so swiftly and never lingers. And they believed that one day, at the very end, the wolf would finally catch her. On the last day of all, at Ragnarök, Skull would seize the sun at last in his enormous jaws and swallow her whole, and the entire sky would go utterly black. It is the darkest solar myth of them all, a whole world that ends the moment its sun is finally devoured by the dark. And yet even here the pattern refuses to break, for the myth promises that before her death, Sol gives birth to a daughter, a new sun as radiant as her mother, who will rise over the healed and reborn world once the great darkness has finally passed. Even at the literal end of everything, the old sun dies, and a new sun is born. Death once more, and then resurrection. Travel now to the warmth of India, where the sun rides a chariot of truly astonishing splendor across the morning sky. His name is Surya, and he crosses the heavens each day in a chariot blazing with the pure light of the dawn itself. It is drawn not by 4 horses, but by 7. 7 horses, said to stand for the 7 colors hidden inside a single ray of light. And his charioteer is Aruna, the rosy glow of daybreak given a body, who rides out ahead of him to announce the coming morning. Surya is the eye of the heavens, the giver of life, the source from whom warmth and health and time itself all flow. Kings across India would proudly claim descent from him, calling their lines the solar dynasty, the sons and heirs of the sun. Here, yet again, the sun is a king in a vehicle of fire, crossing the sky, watched and worshipped by the whole world below. Now sail far east to the islands of Japan, where the sun is not a he at all, and where, at last, the sun truly reigns supreme. Her name is Amaterasu, the great goddess who illuminates heaven itself. She is the highest deity of the entire Shinto faith. Unlike Helios, unlike Sol, she was never overshadowed by a storm god or a king. She was the ruler of all the gods. And her most famous myth is, once again, a story of the sun going out and of a whole world begging for the light to return. Her brother, a wild and violent storm god, tormented her so cruelly that at last, in grief and rage, she fled from the world entirely. She hid herself deep inside a cave and rolled a great stone across its mouth, and in that instant the sun went out. The whole world fell into an endless, freezing night. The crops failed. Evil spirits swarmed in the dark. Creation itself began to die. So all the other gods gathered outside the sealed cave, desperate to find some way to lure the light back into the sky. They hung a sacred mirror and glittering jewels on a tree, and one goddess climbed onto a tub and began a wild, comic dance. The gods roared with laughter at the spectacle. And inside the cave, Amaterasu, puzzled and curious, cracked the great stone open just a sliver. And there she saw her own radiant, blazing reflection in the sacred mirror, shining back at her, and she was drawn out toward it. The very moment she stepped free, brilliant light flooded back across the world. The sun returned, and morning was born all over again. That mirror is said to be enshrined in Japan to this very day, and the emperors themselves claim to descend from her divine line. A hidden sun, a dying world, and the overwhelming joy of the light restored. The very same story told on the far side of the earth. Now cross the greatest ocean of all, to the Americas, where the ancient fear of the dying sun reached its most extreme and bloody form. The Aztecs did not believe in one sun. They believed there had been 5 of them, and that 4 had already died before ours. 4 previous worlds, each one lit by its own sun, and each one utterly destroyed. By jaguars, by wind, by fire, and by flood. We, they believed, live beneath the 5th sun, and it too one day will fall from the sky and take the whole world down with it. This 5th sun is called Tonatiuh, and the myth of how he was born demanded a truly terrible price from the very start. In the darkness before this age, the gods gathered around a great fire and asked which of them would leap in to become the new sun. A humble, sickly little god named the Nahuatzin threw himself into the roaring flames and rose up into the sky transformed as Tonatiuh. But the newborn sun hung motionless in the sky. He would not move at all. He demanded something in return for his precious light. He demanded blood. And so, the Aztecs believed, the sun would only cross the sky if it was fed, again and again, forever. This single belief shaped an entire empire. The Aztecs performed human sacrifice to keep the sun moving and the whole world alive. And beside Tonatiuh stood Huitzilopochtli, the fierce hummingbird god of the noonday sun and of war, protector of his people. Each and every night he was imagined battling the darkness and the stars themselves, so that the sun might rise once more at dawn. It is Ra fighting Apep, half a world away, retold. The very same nightly war fought in the dark to keep the light alive. And finally, high in the thin, cold air of the Andes, one last great empire built itself entirely around the sun. The Inca worshipped Inti, the golden sun god, and believed that their own emperor was his direct living descendant on earth. The Sapa Inca was the son of the sun, ruling by the light of his divine father. To defy the emperor was to defy heaven itself. And once a year, at the winter solstice, they held the great festival of Inti Raymi to honor and to plead with the sun to return. For here too, at the darkest turning of the whole year, was that same ancient fear. What if, this time, the light does not come back? And so we have circled the entire world. Egypt and Mesopotamia, Greece and Rome, the frozen north, India, Japan, and the Americas. Cultures that never met, that could not possibly have copied one another, told astonishingly, hauntingly similar stories about the sun. A sun that rides a boat or a chariot across the sky. A sun that is a great eye, seeing and judging every deed far below. A sun that is a king, whose earthly rulers all claim to be his children. A sun that must be fought for, or fed, or coaxed back into the sky. And above all else, a sun that dies each evening and is reborn each dawn. The very first resurrection that humanity ever believed in. Only the Greeks, in the end, looked long at that blazing disk and quietly decided it was not, after all, the highest god of them all. Everyone else knelt. Because the truth was written plainly across the sky every single morning in enormous letters of fire. The light always comes back. The darkness never truly wins. And to a fragile, frightened species, that was the very first piece of good news. So the next time you stand and watch the sun rise, remember what you are really seeing. The oldest god of all being born yet again.